Welcome back to J Podcast from Change Media, where we share real stories and practical wisdom for founders. I'm Janine Hage, and it's the Unconventional Playbook for Founders, or UP, and we're diving into a day-to-day as a founder to pull out lessons you can use. Today, I'm sharing a story that stretches back to biblical prophet and a legendary artist, revealing a very interesting truth. Communication doesn't always mean alignment or understanding. Get ready for a tale from the trenches that will rethink how you get your team on the same page. Let's dive in. So let me take you back, not to my office this time, but to a story from centuries ago. It's about Moses. Yes, Moses, the biblical prophet, and a marble masterpiece, a sculpture that sits in San Pietro in Rome, carved by none other than Michelangelo. If you've seen it, you know that sculpture is a stunner. Every detail, from Moses' beard to his posture, commanding posture, screams Renaissance genius. But there is one thing that grabs everyone's attention: the horns. Yep, Moses has two visible horns on his head. And no, it's not some artistic quirk. It's a communication fail that's been immortalized in stone. So what's with the horns? So the Bible tells us Moses went up Mount Sinai for a one-on-one with God, coming down with the Ten Commandments, his face glowing from the encounter. The original text, the original Hebrew text, describes this glow as karan, which means rays of light radiating from his face. Sounds divine, right? But karan, the root of karan is keran, which also means horns. So fast forward to the Latin translation of the Bible, and the scholars and the translators, sticking to the root, wrote that Moses came down with horns on his head. Two small letters, one big mix-up. And Michelangelo, working from that Latin text, carved those horns into his masterpiece. I remember standing in front of that sculpture on a trip to Rome, thinking about how a single word got lost in translation. Just how a misunderstanding and a misalignment turned light into horns. It made me think that this wasn't just an ancient oops. It's a lesson I'd seen play out in many business settings. How many times have you sat in meetings where everyone's talking, nodding, sending emails, and yet not sure if they're still on the same page? You're communicating, but how do you know that you're aligned or understanding each other? How do you know that just little horns, just like these little horns, your outcome won't come out something nobody intended? So let's zoom in on this. The story of Moses' horns, is just a funny historical footnote. It's a warning that echoes in every startup office. George Shaw, the writer, nailed it very well when he said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." You think you've sent a clear message, everyone's nodding, but then bam, horns pop up in the outcome. I've seen it happening again and again in brilliant teams, even when everyone is doing their job. Why? Because communication doesn't automatically mean understanding or alignment. So let's break this down. Communication, what's alignment? Communication is the act of sending a message, words, email, gesture, whatever. It's the process. Alignment, though, that's the outcome. A shared understanding, a shared intent, and a commitment to a common goal. You can talk all day, but if your team is not on the same wavelength, you're just sculpting horns. The Moses story shows how even the most careful translators missed the mark because they assumed the message was clear. In your startup, that same illusion can derail projects, can derail teams. So why does this illusion of communication happen? I'm going to share with you 8 traps I've seen in my own work and learned the hard way on why does the illusion of communication happens. The first trap, assuming shared context. You think your team has the same background information, the same priorities as you, but more often than not, they're working from a different playbook. Like, for instance, assuming that user-friendly means the same thing to product and engineering. The second trap is no feedback loop, especially in the written communication. You send an email and assume it's understood, but nobody confirms what they heard. Silence doesn't necessarily mean agreement. It could also mean trouble. The third trap is over-relying on the vehicle of the communication, on the medium. Sending a quick message, a quick Slack message or email feels like communication. But we know that without tone of voice, without context, it could be a recipe for misinterpretation. The fourth trap is language, ambiguous language. You know, the vague terms that we hear flying around, like the buzzwords, innovative, streamlined. These buzzwords mean different things to different people, leaving everyone with their own version of the plan. Another barrier, another trap, is the actual, what we call the emotional barriers. These are the stress and defensiveness, or sometimes a mistrust that could exist within a team. This can twist how the message is sent and how the message is received. For instance, a stressed out team member might hear criticism when you meant feedback. Another one is the famous or infamous confirmation bias. People hear what they want to hear. People hear what fits their existing beliefs, ignoring parts of your message that doesn't align with those beliefs. It's like, for instance, marketing assuming that core audience is who they already wanted to target. Another one is the nonverbal misalignment. This happens when your words say one thing, but your tone of voice or your body language says another. For instance, a casual no rush, but said with a tense face and a smirk sends mixed signals. And the last trap that I would like to share with you is information overload. You dump too much information at once, and your team is there busy deciphering and looking for the key points. A 50-slide deck might feel thorough and hard work, but it can very quickly become a fog machine for clarity for your team. So how do you make sure your team is not sculpting horns when you're aiming for rays of light? How do you move from just talking to true alignment and understanding? That's the multi-dollar question, and I'm not going to answer it here. Instead, I'm pointing you to J Academy, where we've got two powerful frameworks, clear and aligned, to tackle these challenges head on. CLEAR is a framework. It stands for something. The CLEAR stands for something. That framework helps you cut through the illusion of communication with 5 practices to ensure your messages are landing. Align also stands for something, takes it even further. It turns shared understanding into actions, into coordinated actions. So head to jacademy@changegroup.com and get your VIP credentials today to dive into your lessons, the tools, and the practical solutions. That's a wrap on today's Unconventional Playbook for Founders from J Podcast and Change Media. From Moses Horns to your own startup mix-ups, remember, communication is just the start. Alignment is where the magic happens. Next time you're in a meeting, ask yourself, are we all seeing rays of light, or are horns sneaking into the outcome? If this story resonated, subscribe to J Podcast for more tales and lessons from the startup trenches. Share it with other founders, drop us a review, and tag Change Media on socials. Let us know what you think. Next episode, we'll dive into another moment from my journey. Until then, keep building, keep learning, and check out J Academy to make sure your message doesn't get lost in translation. See you next time.